As you all well know, COVID-19 hit hard on the global economy and particularly on international trade. Globally, trade flows experienced a minus 5% in 2020, which was actually better than what had been initially expected, while flows of foreign direct investments experienced a much more dramatic drop, minus 40%, according to data from UNCTAD. Now, recovery is underway, and trade and investment flows have experienced a considerable rebound upwards. However, there are some downside risks behind the corner that could hamper the recovery. Global supply chains are undergoing severe stress and experiencing disruptions. Moreover, the accident of the Ever Given container ship back in March in the Suez Canal revealed how the economic globalization, based on the just-in-time mechanism, is subject to vulnerabilities, exposing also our Mediterranean region to significant risks. So, what should we expect? Are we in the wake of a reset of the international trade system, or rather might we face a new freeze? What we are currently witnessing is a mismatch between demand, which has picked up very quickly as soon as we started seeing a light at the end of the tunnel of the pandemic, and supply, mostly because it hasn't managed to keep up, particularly in high-tech sectors that rely heavily on semiconductors. Why is this happening? Well, actually this is not something entirely new, but it has rather been the acceleration of an already existing trend that the pandemic has exacerbated. The bottlenecks originated along supply chains were also due to the scarcity of containers, which resulted into increased shipping costs, even 500% higher than the pre-pandemic period. To that, we should also add a generalized increase in commodity prices, in particular the so-called rare earths, which are crucial to the manufacturing of semiconductors, which I mentioned before, but also other minerals such as lithium that are key for the production of batteries for vehicles. The increasing demand for these commodities is putting pressure on their prices, with indirect effects also on inflation overall. So, it is quite curious to note that the digital and energy transition are not free lunches, but they also bear some important costs and present challenges that should be addressed. And last, but definitely not least, trade tensions are mostly driven by geopolitical reasons, with the United States on one side and China on the other. The Southern Pacific region will almost certainly be the playing field where Washington and Beijing will face each other in the future. And it was interesting to see that the Biden administration hasn't changed a lot its course from the path that was set by Donald Trump, who had identified China as its main opponent, at least in economic terms. The US's trade deficit against China has kept increasing, and it is in Washington's interest to rebalance, at least partially, this situation, in particular on industrial sectors that have a strategic importance for America's economy: defense and security, ICT, or car manufacturing. So, where does Europe stand in this quite messy picture? In the middle of the two superpowers, not only from a geographic but in particular from a geopolitical point of view, the EU is interested in deepening its economic ties with China, as it was represented by the signature of the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment with Beijing last year. But on the other hand, it also fears China's potentially predatory expansionism for the same reasons of the US. This is why the EU has launched a strategy aimed at increasing its autonomy in technology-intensive sectors by 2030. In parallel, Brussels and Washington recently launched a new initiative called Trade and Technology Council that is aimed at fostering bilateral dialogue and strengthening economic cooperation in these sensitive industries. The meaning of this initiative is mostly political rather than economic, and is aimed at reinforcing the transatlantic relationship. Within this complicated scenario, is there room for multilateral cooperation? As we know, the World Trade Organization has been at a standstill for some years now. The election of a charismatic figure like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as Director General was welcomed as a positive signal to revive the role and the functioning of the organization. But it is still early to tell whether the WTO will be enabled by member states to play a more prominent and effective role. For instance, the United States haven't agreed yet on the appointment of new members of the Trade Appellate Body, the WTO's dispute settlement mechanism. And what about the G20? Trade ministers met a few days ago in Sorrento under the Italian G20 presidency, discussing ways to keep trade open, free and fair. But it is difficult to go beyond simple declarations that lack concrete or binding commitments. So, while talking of a freeze of international trade would certainly be an exaggeration, it is definitely premature to talk of a new era for multilateral trade policies. Certainly, trade flows will keep growing, in parallel with the global recovery. But geopolitical tensions around key economic issues are preventing multilateralism from making significant progress. Meanwhile, the digital and the green transitions are going to pose serious and unprecedented challenges also to our trade systems, as they will have an impact on how goods and services are produced and distributed. Coordination will be key to allow the global community to get ready to move into this uncharted territory.